Good morning, friends, and sorry for the delay. There was a bit of a technical glitch, and yes, there was a bit of emotion around before we finally got down to going live. So, the topic is emotions, friends or enemies. Before we really dive into inquiring into this question of are emotions friends or enemies, let's actually consider for a minute a world without emotions. What would that really look like? Just imagine for yourself. Take 30 seconds and imagine. Check out your daily routine. How would you go about doing it? How would you really view life? How would you view relationships? To me, actually, when I visualize this, I found it pretty scary. Scary because, yeah, just imagine death of a loved one. I remember years ago I lost my mother, and the kind of sadness and grief which I felt, and when I actually experienced it fully, I connected with my love for her, and it was a very different experience. Or the tenderness which I felt when I held Soumya, my daughter, she's 23 now, but when she was born and I held her in my arms, she was like so cute, and the kind of emotion which it evoked within me of love, of tenderness, it was so different. And imagining a world without that is really scary. Having said that, we are actually living in the world where emotions are not really looked upon as something straight in the face, embraced, dealt with. It's largely something which is either suppressed or it takes you over and it overwhelms you. And in that, emotions eventually end up getting a bad name. And this whole question of are emotions friends or enemies comes up. And largely, my experience has been it veers towards this whole aspect of emotions are enemies. Keep them locked away if possible. Otherwise, they are going to create havoc. And actually, if you look at it, emotions is what makes us human. Without the realm of emotions, can you really imagine human being? You'd just be moving around like robots. And this is beautifully depicted in Charlie Chaplin's movie. If you, any of you have seen it, it's called Modern Times. So he's actually going around his work in such a mechanical way and interacting with people in a mechanical way. And there comes a stage where actually he goes crazy and he runs amok because emotions finally, which have been suppressed for so long, take over and he just starts running around. And whilst that was shown in a very comic way, it was extremely telling. And today, all around, we see this. It's either rage which is experienced, or people go through severe health issues. Depression is something that is happening very, very frequently with a lot of people that I know. All this because emotions have not been really looked at in the face, not been really engaged with fully. And if that is the case, what's the reason really for it? If emotions are such an important part of being human, what brings us to a stage where we either operate from one extreme or from the other? What really leads us to that?
So my sense over there, Uday, is I think it's in our upbringing. Look at how parents or adults deal with small children. If a child is crying, what do we say to the child? Don't cry. Basically, don't experience that emotion. If the child is angry, don't be angry. In fact, if the child is happy, don't be happy. Don't jump around, sit down. If you look at this messaging, the messaging is don't. Yeah,
Don't
so
feel.
don't feel. It's not important. Keep it away. Be logical. Be focused. Somehow we also have this that if emotions happen, focus will go away. There seems to be some narrative like that. Focus will go away. Emotions will take you off track. I think that's a big narrative many adults are kind of experiencing. Having said that, you can't get rid of emotions. वो तो है, they are there. Whatever you do, emotions are there. You can't get rid of them. So yeah, somehow by some mechanism, like like emotions are like that water in a swimming pool. in any water body, a ball. They are there, the ball is there. What most human beings don't know what to do with it, so what do they do to try and suppress it inside? And then I think the rage and all that that you spoke about, because a ball
Comes
which
out
is
with greater
kept
force.
in under the water will kind of jump out. That's invariably happens, and hence this question happens: is emotions friends or enemies? But I can't imagine no action can happen if you don't have emotions. Actually, if I don't feel care, compassion for someone, I may not act and do anything for that individual. So, any in fact action that we do, behind that action is an emotion that that individual experiences.
Whether we know it or not.
Whether we know it or not, exactly, whether you recognize it or not, but there is an emotion there. It's actually energy in motion. It's that energy which gets anything in motion.
Yeah, it gets us into motion. It's actually a predisposition to act upon something.
Yeah. But because we don't know how to deal with some of our emotions, this question comes up. Is this an enemy or is this a friend? So I would say my verdict, if you haven't been emotionally intelligent, Daniel Goleman, who's done work on this, he talks about this where he says, yeah, actually, are you able to intelligently work with your emotions? That's the critical thing. But if it looks like a monstrous thing which is going to take me away from focus and stuff like that, people do these things, which is keep emotions completely away. But then what happens, actually even passion is kept away, happiness is kept away, love is kept away, care is kept away, compassion is you can't selectively say only these ones you keep away. That's I think the problem with humanity.
In fact, in the corporate world, which we work with so often, I think the unsaid message which keeps going across is, come into the organization with all your passion and your heart, but keep all the other emotions away. Keep sadness away, hurt away, jealousy away, because these are a complete no-no. You're not supposed to bring all that in. So bottom line, the message is keep your heart out, but bring your passion in. It's a contradiction that we are actually living into. And I would also say that our formal education, if I were to say for myself, it messed me up on this particular aspect. So I got a lot of positives out of it. But when the emotional world is looked at, there's nothing. There's no mention of the word emotions.
There's nothing.
It's all about, if I were to very simplistically put, logically analyze something, 1 plus 1 equal to 2, the cause effect, etc. But really, what does it take to be a complete human being? Never really discussed.
And I'll give you an example. Not that everybody did it. I had two kinds of teachers. In my school, I still remember an episode. Something comic happened in a class. Something which is a comedy that happened. I think a natural human response is to laugh. So all kids, and imagine school kids, okay? We are talking about 5, 6, 7 standard kids. So all of us started laughing. Now the teacher was uncomfortable with the laughing, so what did she say? She said, don't laugh. Yeah? That was one response. Did that stop laughter? Did that get everybody focused back? Actually, it didn't happen. It just superficially, laughter was stopped. That's what the teacher felt. There was another teacher. And all we kids, we used to love that teacher. Something comedy happened, we started laughing. One did not reprimand. I said, okay, you're laughing. What happened? And then we told the sir, this is what happened. And he laughed with us. All of us laughed, and believe me, the laughter went and we were back to studying. We don't know how to do these things. We believe अगर shut कर दिया ना तो ठीक हो जाएगा, focus वापिस आ जाएगा. Actually, I realized through these episodes, the teacher who laughed with us, 2 minutes, 3 minutes went away, but we actually got focus back. That's the beauty. If you walk through the emotions, make friends with it, something would actually alter, something would actually change, is my belief. Yeah. I want to bring in another aspect when it comes to productivity, when it comes to leadership. What's the importance of emotions? Remember, all this that we are doing, productivity, leadership, we are doing it in the midst of people. We are never doing anything alone.
Sure.
Yeah? I mean, imagine in any corporate, you work in a group of people, you can't do anything alone. So as they say, IQ gets you job, EQ gets you promoted. Unless you have this emotional ability, yeah, you are actually stuck. That's one aspect. I think the second aspect is, when I share thoughts with you, if I share some thoughts with you, of course connection happens. At the thought level, momentarily we connect. But it's at a surface level. Thoughts connect us at a very surface level. Whereas when emotions happen between two individuals, any emotion of anger, emotion of sadness, happiness, any emotion that happens, You don't experience emotion at the surface level, you experience it at a body level. And that experience gets stored far more and deep inside you. And that's why they say emotions actually gets us connected to the other people. Yeah, so through thoughts you will not be able to move people because it doesn't instill connection, it doesn't create that connection. Whereas emotions connect. And many people actually do not know how to do this because that emotions looks like a dangerous piece.
It's locked away.
Yeah, so it will take over, my focus will go away, my productivity will go. Those are the conversation. A better way and a better template for human beings would be making friends with emotions. When I look at some of the technological innovations that are happening, yeah, I mean, of course, we are using one such technological innovation, Facebook Live, yeah, all the social media thing. If you look at Facebook's also, there is only one kind of story that is told by people, isn't it? I mean, everybody is super happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a life well lived.
Life well lived on top
And there.
ऐसे होता है क्या? Come on, यार. I mean, every day there are ups and downs. I don't think you see that on social media. So it gets even more unreal, I would
Yes,
say.
absolutely.
Yeah, even more unreal. Can you make it real? What are you experiencing? I'll share one episode here, Uday. Yesterday something happened. We were supposed to meet. There was an individual who was going to come from Bangalore to meet me. And the individual didn't show up. Didn't show up in the sense before the meeting, of course, called up and gave me a story of what happened. Something happened in his life and because of which he can't make it. Little disappointment, but anyway, at a logical thought level, I kind of handled that and moved on with my life. An hour later, the individual said, okay, I want to confess something. I said, oh, what? He said, you know what? Actually, my flight was at 5:15. I got up at 6 o'clock and I missed my flight. That's the real reason why I didn't pay. So my immediate reaction was, I said, I'm disappointed, I'm angry, I'm upset, all that. And that guy said, yes, I completely get that. And actually, I'm feeling guilty. And I was guilty when I missed the flight. I didn't know what to do with this guilt. And his formula was, okay, there is guilt, let me not face the guilt, let me kind of take a shortcut. He did what he did, but believe me, at a personal level, I'll tell you what happened. My connection with that individual just through that one episode actually got strengthened. That's the beauty. Yes, we both of us experienced negative emotions. He was
So-called
experiencing so-called negative, exactly. Guilt he was experiencing. I was experiencing frustration and anger and all that. But expressing those angers, understanding what he went through, that I felt guilty, and in guilt, this is what I do, and I need to discover how to deal with guilt. And that was very profound and powerful. And actually, we felt connected with each other. So I think that's how emotions are. When you indulge in emotional world, it connects. And then you can make it a friend. Otherwise, it looks like a very dangerous enemy. Agreed.
Sure.
Agreed. So that's, I think, so my verdict is, yeah, I think we need to learn about emotions. That's when it is a friend. And when you have not learned any emotion, then it looks like an enemy.
Perfect.
Yeah. So,
And interesting, you means there was a word which you use, negative. Yeah, this is the connotation
yes.
around emotions many a time. So there are positive emotions and there are negative emotions, but actually emotions are just emotions. It's energy in motion. Yeah. So at this stage, do you want to just take a pause? Is there anything, Samskruti,
Any comments or questions?
any
Yeah.
comments, questions?
Nothing at the moment.
So would invite people, because I think, remember this, world of emotions, we can't talk about it because again, when you're talking at a thought level. I think emotions and real life experiences bring out the world of emotions, which we can then have an interaction conversation about. So would urge people to kind of ask questions. I think that's where in an interactive fashion one learns a lot about emotions. So I would urge people to kind of ask your questions and let's kind of respond to that to make it very lively.
Shilpa has something to say, not exactly a question. She's saying also being sensitive about own emotions but not emphasizing or understanding others' emotions create dissonance.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So Daniel Goleman does. Okay, so the question is understanding one's own emotion not enough. You need to still understand the other people's emotions and what they are feeling and all, because otherwise it creates dissonance. That's I think the question. And yeah, it's a comment, but agreed. I think that's what happens. So emotional intelligence is not only understand your own emotions. Can you connect with other people and understand their emotions? Some people have that naturally as a gift. It's something that you can learn, and I can say from my personal experience, I was not in touch with my own emotions, forget other people's emotions, but I have learnt it over a period of time. One just needs to learn to sense it. Yeah, when you sense it, you inquire into it. What's happening here? Yeah, so each one of you must have experienced this. I mean, I can share one of my experience. Suppose I have promised to come by a certain time and I have overshot that time. Yeah, I ring the doorbell and my wife opens the door. She hasn't said anything. I haven't said anything. But can you sense emotions in that space, physical space right now? It shows up, the way she turns, the way she, it's all there. Yeah, I think we need to develop that sensitivity to kind of learn that. That's one. But I'll tell you what used to happen. I still used to be very logical me. So I do used to sense there's something miss here, there's something wrong here. But I would deal with it in a very logical way, which means I will ask my wife what happened. And her response is nothing. Of course, the tone of nothing and all that is also telling a lot of stuff. Then I will take it at a face value, nothing. Okay, nothing needs to be dealt with. So I'm still not connected to the emotional world. I have, I think, done that journey now, and I'm able to kind of understand what emotions is she going through. I don't have to do anything to that emotion. I just need to connect with that emotion, empathize with that emotion. That emotion will pass. It passes, my experience. But if I don't connect with her emotion, yes, that dissonance that I think Shilpa is talking about, that dissonance happens. So, howsoever hard we try and disconnect with that emotion of my wife, that she's feeling upset, I'm late, I think let me not focus on that upset. Actually, what it does, the same volleyball thing, the ball in the swimming pool, I try and suppress her emotion down, it actually comes out with even bigger force.
Big eruption, huh?
Huh?
Big eruption.
Big eruption every now and then. So, better idea is connect with it, deal with it. If you need to apologize, apologize and move on. Yes, it creates lot of dissonance.
There's three questions that have come in. I'm going to take Nina's first. She says, how does one build a vocabulary of emotions? I find generally the words we use to express ourselves are usually limited to sad, happy, anger, etc. So if you could just repeat the question, and then there are two more questions.
Yeah, so how do you build vocabulary? Minal says there are only the basic typical sad, anger, fear, that kind of emotions show up. How do you build vocabulary of different emotions that we kind of experience? Anything you want to respond to that?
So sure. So Meenal, this is a much larger question, but let's start to answer it. This is going to happen spill over somewhat into the next session as well. But if you take one step back and start looking at your life. Now let me share that. How does one build emotional literacy and build a vocabulary for emotions? So even before that, when this question hit me, I had to look into understanding what my world has comprised of in my growing up years. So we spoke about core beliefs, etc. I also came down with a core belief in my growing up years related to emotions, which said that emotions are a sign of weakness. Now, what's the impact of that, and where does this really come from? I grew up in an environment where I kind of role model myself on my dad. Dad is a stoic personality. He will exude seemingly strength in the face of anything that goes on. There's no emotion which really is shown in that. On one hand, he was dealing with his father, my grandfather, who at the drop of a hat would express anger very effortlessly. On the other hand, my mother, she was very easy with connecting and sharing her emotions. And number of times I would see her really sad, and at times she would be crying. And my father's way of dealing with that was being stoic in the face of both. So, what is happening to the inner world as a result of that? Now, leave my father aside, what is happening to me? Continuously, I was getting this message that emotions is not something that one should allow to roam freely. You need to rein them in, because on one hand, it's a sign of weakness, on the other hand, it can cause destruction. Okay, so on one hand, the anger was there, on the other hand, the sadness was there. And truth be told, as a child, I was an extremely sensitive child, to the extent that I would be watching, say, a movie like Sholay. And in the death scene of Amitabh Bachchan, I would actually start crying. And then people would be looking at me saying that, Uday, what happened? And continuously teasing me around it. So slowly I started developing my defenses. And a child who was completely in touch with his emotions and had a literacy around emotion, maybe not the words around it, but the sensing of every emotion, I slowly started shutting down that word. And it came to a place where actually I was being admired for that. That Uday is extremely mature was something that I heard very, very often. And in that maturity, what was there in the background was that actually I had numbed myself out. So no access to the world of emotions beyond a point. This led into my growing up as an individual who had minimal connection with emotions, with people at a basic level, superficially. I wouldn't really go to all those so-called difficult emotions which were there within me, which is hurt, and jealousy, and anger, and sadness. I would keep that away as much as possible. And what happens to the vocabulary as a result of that? Hardly anything. So if anybody would ask me, how are you feeling? Good. Good is the state of the weather. It's got nothing to do with how I'm feeling. So good becomes an overall definition of how I'm feeling or bad. Either good or bad, and the vocabulary is completely lost in that. So how does one start discovering this vocabulary? I think we'll dwell on that a little more at length the next time, in the next session. Is that, yeah?
Yeah. And I would just add, I think in Uday's answer it is hidden, which is rather than looking at vocabulary as collecting a set of words with me so that I'm emotionally intelligent, can you collect a set of experiences, Minal, which you are actually going through? They are not foreign to you. You're going through in your body. Can you learn to recognize the experiences you're going through? Now, what level do you put to it? That's the easy part. Yeah, I mean, if you go on the net and type the words, typical vocabulary for emotions, those words you will get. But just the words, if you get, that doesn't solve anything unless you are in touch with the experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so my example that I shared, that colleague of mine who felt guilty, unless you have the experience of guilt, you may know the vocabulary, the word guilt exists, but don't know when to use it. Why? Because you're not in touch with the guilt. So his inquiry is critical. Which emotions were easily available, which not, as an experience in your childhood? Because that's what is likely to happen with you, and then the friend's enemy happens. Yeah, so I hope, Minal, you kind of got some sense now. You want to?
In fact, I just want to add to this. So, if I were to talk about one particular emotion, that is anger. Now, anger, is there just one experience of it? There are several experiences. It may begin as just a mild irritation. It might go towards a severe anger. It might go towards outright rage. Now, are you having an experience of that in your body? Irritation shows up in a particular way. Anger will show up in a different way, and rage will be completely different. So, developing a vocabulary, I would say the basic emotions that you have spoken about, even taking those, can you look at the range of what happens in that? And can you start describing to yourself what is really happening with me? Yeah?
Yeah, so hopefully, Minal, you got something. I think there are more questions. Sanskruti is waving to me, so yes.
So while we are on anger, there are 3-4 other questions, but because we were discussing anger,
Sure.
this one first. Anger and rage are also emotions. Parijat goes. Usually we don't express in an office setting. Is there a better way of dealing with it without suppressing it in a corporate setting?
Anger or rage.
Yeah, if you could just repeat the question.
Okay, is there a better way of expressing anger or rage in a corporate setting? That's what I got the question as, Parijat. So, I think hidden in your question, I am also hearing a question which is, in a corporate environment, some emotions are okay, some are not okay. I'm almost hearing that as a question. It's almost a
belief.
statement.
Yeah.
And yeah, Parijat, that's a belief that emotions are not okay. But guess what? You are already expressing these emotions. Do you know this? People around you know this. When you are upset, actually people around you know. The only person looks like in the room is not aware of an anger or a rage that you're going through is you yourself. Yeah, that's number one. I think number two is you don't know what to do with this anger or rage that you go through. Yeah, and you believe that by ignoring it, you have got rid of it. But Parijat, bad news. You have not got rid of it. It's going to show in your health or in your well-being at some point of time if you suppress it. It's that ball in the swimming pool. Same thing. Anger, you're putting it down. It's going to bounce back at some point of time. So that's what is happening. Now the question to you is, yes, in a corporate setting, can I express anger? Obviously, there are some ground rules. Yeah, when do you say, what do you say? I still remember in my earlier assignment when I was at Nagpur, yeah, there used to be a situation where I had to fire someone about something. Of course, there are rules about how do you fire. Do I fire someone in front of everybody? What's the impact of that? Do I get him separately in a room, shut the door, center myself, yeah, actually channelize that anger. If I'm at the top of that anger or rage, there is a likelihood that I will say some words which later on I will regret. I don't want to lose the anger, but at the same time, I don't want to get carried away with the anger. So I need to settle myself down and center, and definitely use my anger and rage and say it in those many words, because unless I say it in those many words, the opposite party will not do the desired action. So you need to learn now, how are you going to deal with anger or rage that's happening with you. Shutting down is not an option. Yeah? So there is a whole learning around that you need to go through, and maybe in subsequent videos we'll talk about some of those things. I think these 2-3 things must be happening around, which are hidden in your question itself, around anger and rage.
So Roshni had a similar question about suppression. Uh, she says, I struggle with being with my sadness. I usually want to move on. What's the way to deal with it?
Yeah.
Please repeat the question.
So Roshni says, sadness I do experience, but my way of dealing with it is to, I recognize it, but I move on. I don't want to stay in sadness. Yeah, because somewhere, Roshni, you are saying sadness is actually bad. Sadness is not good. But guess what? You are experiencing sadness, and there is a time and place for sadness as well. It's an appropriate emotion at some point of time. And my experience is, if you don't express it, let me give you an example, Roshni, and see whether that makes sense. Yeah. So when I came into this profession, I was earlier working in banks, and people used to know me as this finance guy, bank fellow. Yeah? And I came into training. I started doing this. Some of my close childhood friends, they wanted to understand exactly what you do. So I never used to give a proper answer. And once they kind of came for a party and they asked me, tell me what you do exactly. So then I started doing some process with them in terms of what I do. Later on, of course, I realized the place was not right and all that. And I think it became threatening for some people. The kind of inquiries that I was doing about their nature and stuff like that, I think their defenses came up. And their way of dealing with those being defensive was, they started making fun of what I do. Yeah, so they said some words, sentences which actually made fun of what I do. You know what I was feeling at that point? I was feeling sad, but I didn't recognize my sadness. What I'm generally in touch with is anger. So, and my response to anger is to zip my mouth and I shut in that party. I think everybody noticed it. My wife noticed it much more. Later on, there was a comment, what happened to you and all that. And I said, I'm feeling angry, and I thought I will write a mail to all of them. I wrote a mail but saved it in the draft. I didn't send it. I wrote it but saved it there. Then I did an inquiry. What am I actually feeling? Then I realized, no, I'm not feeling anger. I'm actually feeling sad. These are my childhood friends. If no one else, I was expecting them to support me, and they making fun of me just made me feel sad. Actually, next day and sad was, I felt, was what I was feeling, and I expressed my sadness to my friend, saying, you know, when this happened, I felt sad. Thank God I didn't send the first email. If I would have shot off that anger email, you can imagine what that would have done, versus when I sent the sad email. The result was that when I sent the sad email, I think everybody called me to apologize, number one. And number two, actually they said, okay, we want to learn what you actually do. So you decide a time, you decide a date, we will come, what rules you set, we will do it accordingly. And we actually ended up doing a session with those friends. So that's how it is. And if you recognize sadness, it's an appropriate thing at an appropriate occasion. Express it and see what that does. You can't replace that with something else. You can't shut that down. Same with rage, as I said, you can't put that sadness down. If you put that sadness down, it's going to come out in some other way. अगर sad है, express करो, move on, let it pass. See, what we do is we deny. When you acknowledge and experience it, it will pass. हमारा डर है, we fear that these emotions will come and stay with us permanently. They don't. They check in and they check out. They will check out, don't worry. But when they check in, I mean, let them check in. If sadness wants to check into your hotel, let it check in.
So just to add on, Roshni, is my question to you would be to inquire into your relationship with sadness. What's your belief around sadness? What makes you want to go away from there? Perhaps it's something related to what connotation do you have for sadness. And second is, out of actually believing in this, what impact has it had on your relationships, your ability to relate with people, your ability to develop a certain presence for yourself, a deeper connection with yourself. If you were to really inquire into these areas, where does this whole thing really come from? So one is, yes, your ability to be with it and allow it to pass. One step before that would be to actually inquire into what's your belief around emotions, and why does, to me it seems like sadness is an enemy. Is it an enemy for you? And if yes, why? What's really happening within you when you want to move away from sadness? Yeah. What's the belief that is driving this whole thing? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Um, Ninja Mayur Vijay, I don't know if I have the name right, says when I experience an emotion which I consider not working for me for that situation, I try and suppress it and show the opposite of that emotion. So say anger to calmness or sadness versus joy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Is there a practice which can help me out? Similar to that, we have a question from Arun, which says, are there techniques which could help us to balance one emotions? And Shreyashri asks, how do you deal with them?
Okay.
Okay, three questions. Have you collected
Yeah,
all of
sure.
them? Just repeat the question.
So, questions are around how does one balance? Second is around what should one do? Replace one with the other, or is there some technique for us to be able to deal with these? So, of course, there are techniques, and we will dive more into these in the next session. Uh, if you have to just give some names, yes, we can give. However, it will be useful to really uh, firstly gain an understanding of how each one of us is wired up. So, just a question, how much time do we have now?
Uh, we, we've been on for about, I think, 32 minutes now.
32 minutes, so
Another
around 10 minutes. So,
10
what do you
minutes
want to
maybe.
do? We'll take these questions or we take them
We'll
the
take the
next time?
questions, looks like.
Yeah.
We'll have to take the questions.
Same ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
And postpone it what we are attempting to do in the next this thing, because emotions is going to be a series now. Few more live sessions will happen, but let's answer these questions. You have something as a response?
So, one thing which has helped me tremendously over the years in actually engaging with the world of emotions has been the practice of Vipassana. So, Vipassana, as you know, is an ancient technique of meditation which has been passed down, and it deals with human beings at different levels. At a much deeper level, it is about inquiring into the question of who am I really. Second is developing emotional intelligence as a byproduct of it. Our ability to actually be with emotions fully. So Atul has been talking about that. How can I be with every emotion and allow it to pass? Easier said than done. That's not intellectual awareness. It's something that happens in the body. So developing body awareness, connecting the world of the body with emotions. When I'm going through a certain emotion, how do I really feel it in the body? And how do I develop an ability to allow it to pass through the body? That's the area where one has to gain mastery. So that's a very critical aspect of it. So Vipassana is one method. So that's a meditative way. There are several other ways to really approach. Second aspect could be, are we really aware of our triggers? When something is happening in the environment, there is a stimulus. What happens to me internally? What emotion gets triggered off? What's the belief which is driving that emotion really? That's an inquiry which one really needs to do. Much deeper than that is understanding, I'm trying to actually fulfill some need. And that's why this emotion is coming up. So simply put, if I have to say, emotions are like the dashboard of a car. What's there on the dashboard of the car? There are indicators. So there's a fuel gauge and there's temperature, etc., etc. So if the fuel gauge is empty, what is it indicating? Fill up. Okay, fill up the tank. Similarly, in the matter of emotions, if I'm sad or if I'm happy, say for example, if I'm happy, there is a certain need which is actually getting fulfilled within me, and that's making me happy. On the other hand, if a need is not being met, it shows up as emotions which are different in terms of maybe If they are not met, it will show up as hurt, it may show up as anger, it may show up as sadness. So it's a deeper inquiry to really get into. So I would say if you have to take it step by step, I would urge each one of you to actually start discerning what are some of the occasions where you start experiencing different kinds of emotions. So build that awareness around yourself and combine it with understanding at a body level what is happening to you. Along with that, if you can really look at what need of yours is either being met or not met related to whatever is happening in the environment. It's something which can help you in developing, I would say, the basic level of emotional awareness. As well as then the next step is starting to regulate that. So anything you want to add on?
So I just want to add on the first part of the question which was asked, which is I'm experiencing anger, but I show the opposite, calmness. And if I now take Uday's narration here, that behind the emotion, it's a dashboard telling you there's a need behind. So if you're feeling angry, there is a need there. Now just imagine you want a certain employee to demonstrate efficiency. That's your need. Efficiency is what your need is, and the person is not demonstrating efficiency to you. And you're feeling angry about it. Now just imagine you are expressing calmness. अभी क्या होगा? Calmness experience, you will actually confuse the other person. See, the individual knows he was supposed to produce at a certain level, hasn't produced it, maybe feeling a little guilt, and you're very calm. How does he interpret that? Yeah, question is, yeah, it is anger, and anger is telling you something. What you're almost doing is the dashboard says petrol is empty, tank is empty, fill up petrol. You're not filling up petrol. So if anger is happening, I think anger needs to be expressed, not calmness. But anger expressed does not mean you start hitting the person, throw the paperweight, or raise your voice or start shouting or demean or disrespect. No, none of that. But you express, I'm angry, I'm upset. This is what I'm expecting to happen, and have a conversation with that individual. I think that's appropriate. That's when your need gets met. Otherwise, your need remains. You're calm. Next time, the individual does the same thing. So I think showing opposite, I'm not sure what purpose does it serve.
And it's, as I see it, it's inauthentic to
It
yourself
is.
as well as to the
To others.
It's like there is one ball of, say, anger which is there in your hand, and you have pressed it deep within, and now you are trying to show I am absolutely calm. So let me try and do that. Does this really sound or even seem authentic? We feel that we are being smart, but actually it can be sensed. This whole aspect of, yeah, I am being inauthentic in the moment. Energy which is exuded because we are actually holding on to a certain emotion is exuded out. And actually that is something that is called as mood contagion. It's contagious. Your mood is contagious. So if I'm holding on to a mood of happiness, you can very well be clear that in the room you will be sending out those waves. If I'm numbed out, I'm sending out a wave of disconnection actually. I'm not interested in it. I'm not there with it. So how is it that one actually can be authentic with it? It's not about replacing one with the other. It's about every emotion having its place, building our ability to feel it fully and allowing it to pass. I think that's the mastery that one is really looking forward to. Yeah.
We have two more questions. One is from Vicky Mehta. What if the person across does not understand your sadness or emotions? And there is one from Meena which is completely different, so we can take it after this one.
Sure. So,
Vicky Mehta, what if the person across does not
Understand.
understand your sadness or emotions?
I'll take it.
Yeah.
So, Vikisha, I think the question that you have asked has been very real for me in my life. So, as I just shared a little earlier, I grew up to be a person who's completely numbed out and who would look at any emotion as weakness, so-called negative emotions. So, in the initial years, Shelly is my wife, and she was a polar opposite of me that way. Extremely free flowing with her emotions, willing to cry at the drop of her hat and show her emotions fully. If I am constituted as an individual who believes that emotions are a sign of weakness, how am I actually going to deal with her? Actually, I used to just run away from the situation. I would shun her, and the chatter in my mind would be saying that there is something wrong with her, not me. And I would move away. What did it do to the relationship? It created immense strain on our relationship. So there she would be actually expressing herself fully, and I would be saying that there is something wrong with her, and my way of dealing with was just shutting off. So unless and until I went on that journey of actually becoming emotionally intelligent, there was no way. So there's no quick fix in that. It's a journey which one has to undertake. So moving from a place where actually I was numbed out and just not available to the world of people, to today I would say I have traveled a long distance. How does one make the other person understand? I think the first step is the journey within. It's very difficult. So if Shelley were to tell me in those days that Uday, you need to understand me and my tears, I would say in my mind, what are you talking about? What you're going through is completely invalid, and what you're doing is just a drama. I don't connect with you at all. So it's a matter of really starting to understand yourself first. Unless my emotional world really opened up, it was impossible for me to connect with someone else's emotional world. It would show up even in my connection or disconnection with my daughter Soumya. So in my initial years as a parent, I was just moving around zombie-like. There's this cute girl who's moving around in my house, and I'm hardly in touch with her. So that was my experience. So this is, again, I'm saying it's not a quick fix. It's an immersion which is really required in relationships. So whether it is with Atul and I, or in our team, or at home, we have really been experimenting with this world of emotions full out. We do it with our clients as well. So that's something that I enroll the world into. Can I really be allowed? Can I allow myself to be real first? And can I allow the other person to be real? These are aspects.
Take the last one.
Last
This
one.
one's from Meenal. My understanding is that we usually tend to mirror the techniques of dealing with emotions which we have seen our parents or elders exhibit over the years. Is this how it usually works? So just repeat the question.
So I think Minal's question is that we tend to copy or role model ourselves on how our parents dealt with emotions, and then we kind of imbibe that in our behavior. Yes, Minal, very true. In fact, as Uday said some time back, our formal education, there's zero information or zero connection to emotion. They don't talk about it. So question is, how do we learn about emotions? The only way is, yeah, just observing adults around when you're very small. And the funny thing about emotions is that the three parts of the brain, a part of a brain called the limbic system, which actually develops when you are very young, and that's the seat of emotions. That's your emotional memories, and that's where it gets stored. This part of the brain develops when you're very small. After that, no development of that brain really happens. So actually our emotions are learned at that point of time, and mostly at that age, who you are surrounded with is your parents. Yeah, earlier we had joint family system in which maybe there are some more adults that you get exposed to, but yes, you actually role model yourself on the way they dealt with it, and you create your own role model. I think Uday did speak about he role modeled himself on his father who was stoic. Yeah, I role model myself on my mother. Yeah, so I would get hyper, I'll get angry, I'll do some of those things. Those were my ways of doing things. Though my response to my anger was role modeling on my father. If I get upset, I will keep quiet. I will zip. But anger is to be a very predominant way that happens to me. But I would zip, which is my father's way of doing it. That's how it is for everybody. We need to realize this now and actually build a vocabulary and muscle to deal with and understand all kinds of emotions. That's what helps in producing more your leadership, your relationship, your connection. So it's possible to expand your ways of dealing with emotions, but that's how you need to do. First, recognize what are you stuck with. And yes, parents play a big role there.
In fact, I think just as a final, we'll wind up now, Samskruti. Last couple of minutes. So I just want to say something. So Atul has mentioned about it impacts your leadership, your relationships, etc. Now, if I have to make it a little more granular and go to the other extreme, if one remains in this suppressed state, what really happens? I can share only from my experience, one of the experiences which I've been through. So growing up as a numbed out person, where did it really leave me? Having difficulty in relationships with people. Second is inability to really connect with the world of my team members and inspire them beyond a particular point. I could do it, I was successful, but it happened only at a certain level. Really understanding that world and being able to inspire them was not available to me. As a parent, disconnected. And all this continued till one point of time. I was pretty young at that point of time, around 29, 30 years of age. And it came up as a big wake up call for me. I was a typical driven executive traveling around 20 days a month and in the pursuit of success, business, ensuring that I'm going to be reaching the next frontier of achievement. And one fine day I was speaking on the phone and suddenly this left arm went numb for 30 seconds. I was scared. I went to the doctor and he said, Uday, you're completely stressed out. And he says, one of the critical things you'll need to start dealing with is your world of emotions. Looks like you are very suppressed and you're not able to actually deal with whatever you're going through. That's why it's showing up as so much stress. That was my first wake up call, amongst many others. So, yeah, in the face of these wake up calls, it made me actually go down deep into immersing into emotions and finding out what could I do in this particular area. How do I become more whole as a human being? How do I restore my humanness? And the invitation to all of you is not to wait for a wake up call. There is ample opportunity to bring more life to life if we make friends with emotions. And as a foundation for our next session, we would. You have anything to say? I'll just leave them with two.
Yeah, so I think wake up call,
reflections.
I just want to make one comment on the wake up call. Watching this video, treat this as your wake up call if you haven't worked on this. Don't wait for the other wake up call to happen. Yeah.
And foundationally, to kind of transition into the next session, which we are going to be having on the
10th of August.
10th of August, we will dive deeper into this realm of emotions and how does one start building emotional awareness and start dealing with emotions differently, leading to much more connected and powerful communication. So we will be transitioning to that. But as a foundational reflection, look into your life and see how did you get formed as an individual. What are the kind of emotions that you are in touch with? You are easily able to access them. Which are the ones which you label as negative and try to keep them away? What are those? So do a reflection on that and try to understand. Second is look at what are your emotional triggers. That somebody says something, pushes a hot button, and maybe you flare up, or you shut down, or you move away from the situation. What really happens to you? Reflect in your life, and maybe you can ask some people also around you, how do you think I show up? What do you think are the areas which I need to focus on? How do I show up emotionally? So get this feedback ready. It's going to provide you much more depth in the next session then for reflecting in your own life and doing something with whatever we are talking about. So yeah, thanks for joining us and see you again on the 10th. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.